This episode of 1v1, the Creator Interview Series, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support this show and the Boss Rush Media family of podcasts, head over to patreon.com/bossrushmedia or search for us on the Patreon app on your smart device. Thanks for helping us build something better. Hello, everyone, and welcome to 1v1 with Boss Rush Network. I'm your host, Celeste Roberts. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Jamie Madigan, an author with a Ph.D. in psychology who has written the books Getting Gamers, The Psychology of Video Games and Their Impact on the People Who Play Them, and The Engagement Game, Why Your Workplace Should Look More Like a Video Game. He is also the host of the Psychology of Video Games podcast, which is how I discovered Jamie. So thank you so much for making time, especially on a Tuesday night, to talk about yourself, Jamie.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So I was looking up psychology podcasts and video game podcasts, and I was kind of curious if the two worlds collided, and
if I got
sure
the podcast for you, yes.
So, how are you doing today? What have you been up to? It's early January. How's 2023 looking for you?
So far, so good. Just kind of getting back into the swing of things after the holiday break. I got a day job I work on, and then I do this whole psychology of games thing in my off time, nights and weekends kind of stuff. So, switching gears and spending my night talking about psychology of games.
Usually when it's a passion project like that, you look forward to it. It probably doesn't feel like too much work, I would imagine.
No. I cut back if it starts to feel like too much work.
Yeah. So what can you tell us about yourself? Like, what are some of your hobbies, your location, any fun facts you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, the hobbies are probably obvious. I'm into psychology and video games and writing about those over at psychologygames.com, the podcast and all that. So that takes up a fair amount of my time, and squeezing in games whenever I can. I also play a lot of tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, which I've done pretty consistently. Like for the last 12 years, I've got a couple of groups actually that I play with. Yeah, every week. So that's a good time. And I'm working on another book about the psychology of that. And beyond that, just kind of, spending time with the family and watching TV and movies and all that stuff. And that's about what I've got time for lately.
Do you sleep sometimes?
Sometimes. Yeah. I get a good sleep every night.
Well, on your website, psychologyofgames.com, I was reading that you've actually consulted with some video game studios before.
Yeah. Occasionally they'll see something that I wrote or see the website and want to just bend my ear or bring me in as like a consultant or do a lecture occasionally, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Are there any games you'd like to share that you've worked on?
None really that I had enough involvement with that I would claim having, worked on them. It's just kind of like consulting and doing lectures for the most part on that kind of stuff. And then I think there were a few that like never really kind of went anywhere. I couldn't even remember off the top of my head. Even most of that was like years ago too. Kind of back when like the first book came out and my name was kind of out there because of that. And the podcast was just getting started. So.
Wow. So is there a game that you have in mind that you would like to design or be involved in? Like, is there a certain genre you would just love to work on?
I've heard the game design and working in the games industry is really tough. So I'm not sure I could hack it doing that. I've got friends that have done it and are currently doing it and have made that transition from like games media, press kind of roles to either working in like PR or other or game design or community management, that kind of stuff. And it sounds like they're always just working real hard. And I always like caution people to say like, I'm not a game designer. I can't like tell you if a game is well designed. I just try to popularize this, the psychology literature to like understanding what's going on with games and like why they're designed the way that they are. So, I can tell you about reward schedules and why people behave as they do under certain circumstances and why you may want to structure like reward systems or level up systems, or like why the successful ones are designed the way they are. That kind of stuff. That's where I've really tried to make it my mission, is to popularize that stuff and get people thinking and talking and sharing research around that, to marry the research literature and the science with the practice of game development and community management and marketing of games and selling of games and all that sort of stuff. So, at the end of the day, I'm not too disappointed that I'm not a game designer these days, but if I can bring a little bit of that careful thinking to game design, to working in the games industry, then I think that I've fulfilled my mission that I've adopted there. And from what I've heard, over the years, a lot of game designers and people who otherwise work in the gaming industry have found like the website and the podcast and the book, and found some use for it, or found like, oh yeah, like I didn't know that was what it was called, but I've been doing that, or I've been designing systems in that way, or that's why we designed this system in our game that way. And they appreciate having like, a name put to it, and then some research to back it up, to say like, okay, outside of a video game context, here's what's going on. Here's the psychology behind it. Because I get the feeling and the impression that a lot of the game designers out there think like scientists a lot of times, and they think like psychologists a lot of times, and that they'll experiment and iterate and sort of like figure out what works, and then measure, and then form hypotheses and like test them, or pay attention to what happens when they tweak this or that, and iterate until they get something that works when they're able to. And so I appreciate that. And we end up kind of speaking, well, we end up finding like common ground and speaking in different languages about the same thing, which is always fascinating to me.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Jamie. Okay, you kept mentioning rewards. Is there a particular game or game series or even a genre that you find does really well with that, and that's why it might be so successful or popular?
Yeah, I mean, the big example I always go to is the earlier Diablo series, especially like the transition from Diablo 2 to Diablo 3. It's been a few years, and we've had Diablo Immortal in the meantime, which I try not to think about because it's a nightmare. But I'm looking forward to Diablo 4 coming out sometime later this year, I think. This year or next year. Yeah, not relatively too far off. But Diablo, and there's a whole chapter about this in the Getting Gamers book, about how when they first launched Diablo 3, they had auction houses in the game. So you could go, and they had two auction houses. One, you could pay real money, so US dollars or local equivalent, to buy stuff that other players had found. So they would auction it off. And then the other one, you did the same thing, but you used gold, which was like the in-game currency, that everybody's used to having. And Blizzard, I think, made a lot of money, especially off the real money auction house, because of course they wet their beak, they took a slice, charged a fee, that kind of stuff. But they noticed like what was happening to like the game loop in Diablo, which is where you go out and you kill monsters, you get excited about finding treasure, and you upgrade your character in some way through gear and loot, and then you sort of repeat. So it's like you go out, you find an elite monster to fight or a treasure chest to open, you anticipate what random reward you're going to get, and then you're enough of the time, it's random what you get. So sometimes it's nothing, but sometimes it's something really awesome, and you get excited. But the auction houses that they put up really like short circuited that whole game loop, because if it was time to like upgrade your gear, you didn't go out and look for treasure chests to open or elite monsters to fight or a boss. You just went to the auction house and you bought some +5 pants to replace your +3 ones, or a better weapon or so forth. And kind of to Blizzard's credit, they redesigned the whole loot system. I don't know if I'd say like from the ground up, but substantially. And they got rid of the auction houses to kind of preserve the appeal of that random reward schedule of, you don't know what you're going to get when you open that chest or beat that boss. And that was more compelling for players and got them to, I think, to keep playing and go to the late in-game content, where they were doing runs on dungeons and adventure areas that was just for the sake of trying to get that one perfect piece, to complete their set or their build. And that was always, I always like that example of like, here's why random reward schedules work in games. You know, it's nice to be surprised. And it's nice to be surprised because most of the time you're not surprised. And so it really stands out and it motivates us and it keeps us, you know, those reward systems in our brain that have evolved over time to serve us pretty well. Games hijack those, you know, psychological mental systems for our entertainment. And it was nice to see Blizzard like realize the value of that and step back and do something that was better for the sake of the game.
If you want to be a Patreon producer, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/BossRushMedia, and find out which tier is right for you. Our Patreon producers at the $5 tier or higher for this month are Adriel Munger, Austin Campbell, Celeste Roberts, Christian S., Sana Dierig, Francisco Santillan, and Rebecca Jewell. Thank you for your continued support.
Surprises are nice. I've subscribed to different things before, like I don't know, like makeup kits, for example. Like pay $10 a month, you get a random sampling of makeup, and sometimes they'll say you might get this or you might get that, and it was actually a little bit more exciting for me to not know exactly what I was getting.
Yeah, they do the same thing with just like geek stuff. Like you'll get like T-shirts or a coffee mug or some decals, but you never know like what they're going to be from. It could be some obscure anime you've never heard of, or it could be from your favorite video game series. And you're kind of surprised and I guess entertained is at least the hope whenever you open that box up every month.
Do you enjoy those kinds of boxes and that kind of gamble?
No, not really. I kind of, maybe it might be fun once or twice, but then I'm looking at like, I'm not paying like $50 a month for this. I could just take that money and buy what I want with that kind of stuff. So it's fun, maybe a time or two, or to receive as like a gift or a promotion. But yeah, I think the shine kind of wears off, especially after the few times where I get something I'm like, what is this? I don't even know what this is. I'm not wearing this.
This T-shirt is 3 times my size. I can't even get used to it.
I can't shard this for crafting supplies, so I'm not really interested.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's go a little bit back in time. And what got you interested in psychology? Did you always know, I want to study psychology, I want to be a psychologist, I want to pursue my Ph.D. Or
a wee lad? Yeah. Growing up, 2-year-old trying to pursue a career in psychology. No, I mean, it was when I got to college and I had some good professors, as you know, it is often the case. And I had some friends, some older friends who were friends of my older sister, who were psychology majors. And specifically, like they were pursuing what I eventually got my PhD in, which is industrial organizational psychology, which is psychology applied to the workplace. It's like IO psychologists study human behavior in the workplace, and we try to make work not suck. And that's the basic idea. And there were a couple of professors, Bob and Joyce Hogan, at the University of Tulsa, where I went to undergrad, and they were really good professors. And they were, some of these older guys were like grad students of theirs. And so they knew them. And so they kind of brought me into the fold, and I got to help out some grad students on some research and run subjects through lab studies, which pretty much just involved like handing out papers, but made me feel important at the time in any case. And like, I knew that, and I liked all my psychology classes, but I knew it was like a really broad field, right? Like there's a lot of different flavors of psychology, a lot of different corners of the field. There's clinical psychology, that deals with like counseling and mental health issues. There's industrial organizational, which is more applied to the workplace. There's consumer psychology. There's, animal experimental psychology and media psychology and all of these other different kinds of psychology. And I kind of knew I didn't want to go into the mental health aspect of it because I have enough time dealing with my own problems. I really didn't want to like try to be responsible for other people. Like I didn't think that would go well for them if they place their hopes in me. And I know I have friends and internet friends who are therapists of that kind. Many of them kind of that use games and video games, comics and other vessels of popular media and popular culture in their practices. And God bless them, because they're great at their job and they help a lot of people. But I never really felt like that was my calling. So I went into IO psychology because I thought it would be useful for me and I could help organizations solve problems and do better and help employees be happier. in their jobs. And so that's kind of what I ended up, following, getting my master's and PhD in that eventually. And
Wow.
that's what I'm doing in my day job to this day.
Wow. So companies who seek out your services, are they usually larger companies or small mom and pop size companies of the broad spectrum of companies?
Yeah, I mean, in my career, I've worked for small consulting companies, small being like 50 people. And then I've worked for large federal government agencies, which I don't recommend. And then I've worked for a small startup company, like a tech startup company that had some web services and apps that we were developing that were related to IO psychology and helping people do that kind of work. And then I've worked for large like utility companies and private companies that sell things over time. So I've worked for a lot of different, never any like mom and pop gas station or anything like that. I don't tend to get called up for those types of roles. But I maybe, would work, when I was in grad school, I did like some internships for like boutique, what we call like boutique consultants, people that would just be like one or two people in an office and they have clients and maintain a client list and make a living that way. So a good range of different kinds of things in different industries. And I'm still enjoying it. It's, it's a growing field. More and more IO psychology PhDs are being minted every year. And the industry is kind of growing, and it's typically seen as a growth area as well.
Wow. So do you mostly work with the HR department, the CEO?
Yeah, I mean, usually I've been situated within the human resources department. And so there might be like a group of IO psychologists in that group that are maybe either act like internal consultants, like we'll get loaned out to different departments within the company and go help like implement this thing or answer this question or do this problem or manage this program. So yes, it's usually within the HR group.
Now, this might be a silly question, but is there a certain phase in a company's life that you would get involved, or is it all phases? Is it beginning? Is it middle? Is it, oh my gosh, we've hit a crisis?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually larger companies that are either working in or customers of, because a lot of times you'll need to answer questions like, how do I organize people into groups? How do I hire the correct people? And when I'm dealing with high volumes of hiring, I need to hire like 100 or 300 or 500 people in this role across a year. How do I, best allocate these training budget and resources? How do I teach people? How do I upskill people? That kind of stuff. So yeah, you're usually dealing with a certain critical mass of like employees. Not always necessarily, but most of the time, especially in the types of niches within that industry that I've worked in typically, which has been like assessment, like developing assessments and tests for people who are applying for jobs to make sure they have the right skills, that they're good at what they claim that they're good at, or that they know the things that they claim they know, those kinds of things.
Oh, neat. So where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years?
I don't know. Probably pretty close to where I am now. I think, things are good. So I'm not sure I'll be moving on anywhere. I just started with this most recent company like last April. So I've been there for less than a year. Yeah.
Awesome. But in your free time, whenever you have it, you love video games, and we're gonna continue this journey down memory lane. And I'd love to know what got you into video games. Your parents, siblings, yourself, friends?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that's always been into video games. I'm part of like that first generation that really grew up with the hobby. It was kind of always around in some form. And like as a kid, I was always I always say that I was a arcade rat. So the old coin operated. And maybe I'm like dating myself a little bit here.
No, I grew up with those too.
The old kind. Well, then you know what I'm talking about. The old kinds of games you would plunk a quarter at a time or a token, depending on which arcade you went to play for a few minutes, and then you continue your game or start over. So, I lived in those arcades. There were a couple of them near where I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and spent a lot of time there. Even got to know the arcade attendants that were working there, and made friends. And then, eventually graduated into things like home consoles and home computers. So, I had really the earliest days of the old Atari 2600. I remember getting that for Christmas one year. And then for a long stretch, I played PC games, home PC games. I'd play Wizardry and Ultima series, and then just other kind of random stuff that I can sort of remember, but don't remember the specifics about. And then just continued that hobby and that habit throughout most of high school. And then when I went to college, I kind of got, that was my gaming gap when I was too busy for the most part, with college and studying and partying and hanging out with, all the new people I was meeting and all that stuff and having a good time, and sort of dropped out of the hobby then. And then when I eventually started going back to grad school, I bought another personal computer with my student loan money so that I could have it, to write my papers and do my research and so forth. And then I was like, what's over here in the gaming section of Best Buy? And picked out a few things and sort of made my way back into that hobby. And then before long was deep into games like StarCraft and StarCraft 2 and Doom, and then eventually Quake and all of those first-person shooters from the mid to late 1990s, and adventure games and Baldur's Gate and all those great, what were they? The Infinity Engine role-playing games, or Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and all that whole series of games. And then from there, just kept with it. And it's been one contiguous, unbroken streak of gaming since then to this day. And eventually even worked at sort of in or maybe adjacent to the gaming industry for a while for a company called GameSpy Industries in the early 2000s. And GameSpy they had two sides of their business, and one was middleware for game developers. So it was oh, you want multiplayer matchmaking in your game? We have software that will just plug into your game, and you can lease it or buy it from us or work out a deal. And then the side that I worked on was more the gaming content side. So it was the genesis of the gaming websites and social. This is the days before social media, but we had a network of websites that were fan sites, and then we had sites you could download files and find cheat codes and walkthroughs and all that kind of stuff for games. So did that for a few years, and then went back into the IO psychology thing after a while, because I was wow, I spent a lot of time and money getting my Ph.D. in this. I should probably do something with it. So I went to work for GameSpy right when I graduated with my Ph.D. And I told my professors what I was doing, and they were like, what your game? What? And they couldn't believe it. So I was like, no, it's a small startup company. It's going to be fun. I'm moving out to California from, St. Louis, where I went to grad school, and it'll be a blast. And it was. So glad that I did it.
I think it's important for people to have a variety of jobs and different hobbies and things they try, because that's really how you find what you love.
Yeah. I like to try on different hobbies and learn new things. I've been into photography and web design and all kinds of just random little stuff like that I'll just catch an interest in. And podcasting, we just kind of got up one morning. It's I should do a podcast about all this. And how do I do a podcast? What do I need? How do I do it? How do I, what software do I need? What hardware and so forth. So yeah, just try stuff out. It's amazing what's out there as a resource to help you figure it out.
It really is. And I mean, it's literally at our fingertips with our phones. And gosh, I remember the days of having to use the library card catalog for my research papers.
Yeah.
And scanning documents and highlighting different things and making sure I got the author's name and the correct title for the MLA format. And oh my gosh.
It's burned into my brain at this point. Yeah. Could do it in my sleep.
So regarding games, so you were mentioning games that sound kind of like massive multiplayer online games. Is that kind of your preferred genre, or first-person shooters?
No. So I've dipped into the MMOs occasionally, but they're at this point in my life, and for a while now, they're too much of a time sink, right? I can't sit there and play 30 hours a week. to grind out a lot of those things. I played like World of Warcraft, when it was hot, because I was like a sense of obligation. I was like, I should know what this is. I should like play this for a while. And it was fun. But then I just kind of like sat up one day and was like, I have sat here for like 9.5 hours and played this game on a Saturday. This is not healthy for me. So, cut back and play some other different kinds of games. But yeah, I play a lot of different kind of stuff, first person shooters, action adventure games. Favorite series is like the Soulsborne series from Software, like Dark Souls, Bloodborne.
Mm-hmm.
I've started yet another run through Elden Ring within the last few weeks, of replaying that again. So that's my favorite type of game and series of games that I keep going back to, and have beaten all of those games multiple times.
Nice. So
Yeah.
do you and your family, your friends play any games in person sometimes?
Yeah. So I have 2 kids, 2 daughters, and I always threaten, my wife doesn't play, and I always threaten that, like, if you won't turn into a gamer, I'll make one myself. And so like I trained them from an early age, to play games with me. And so we played games on the Xbox, couch co-op, types of games, like the Lego games, like Lego Harry Potter, Lego Batman, Lego Star Wars. I played a lot of those with my older daughter. And she is 18 now, just went away to college, over the summer, and she was home for Christmas break, and she just left a couple of days ago to go back for her second semester. So I played with her a lot, and my younger daughter as well. And she plays a lot. She has like the weirdest combination. She'll play a lot of Roblox, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's like a gaming platform that's typically skewed at younger kids. And she has played it since she was younger. But she also plays a lot of, what's that one? Genshin Impact. And she plays a lot of Valorant, which is a competitive online first-person shooter.
Wow.
She's like really good at Valorant. I would not want to play against her. And then she plays like a lot of casual games, which are those like packing games where you kind of like arrange everything into like a box, or unpack things, or like power wash a house, or weird stuff like that. So she has like a very eclectic collection, but it spans a lot of different areas. So yeah, we've played games together for years now.
Do you think either of your daughters will venture into the world of esports?
No, I don't think so. They're too old at this point. Even the 16-year-old is too old, I feel. No, I mean, I don't think so. I think one of them might have had aspirations of being a Twitch streamer at one time or another. It didn't really follow through with that.
Oh yeah, there's so many ways. I never would have dreamed when I was a kid or a teenager that, hey, I can watch my friends who moved away play a video game and interact with them.
For sure. Yeah.
Mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And if my older daughter that's gone off to college had like a computer that could play a lot of games, like she doesn't, just for space reasons, because her dorm is like so tiny and she shares it with another person. She doesn't really have room for like a proper PC gaming rig. But maybe if she gets an on-campus apartment or something bigger later, we'll work something out. I'll use it as an excuse to upgrade my computer and then send her my old one. That's usually what I do.
Yeah, you get the shiny new toy.
Right.
Oh, you're making me all sentimental, because my dad plays video games as well. And my parents have 3 daughters, and video games have been a huge part of our life. I remember
how with your parents or your dad?
Oh, yeah.
And your sisters? Or
Yep. My mom would watch us, and even though she didn't really play games, she enjoyed seeing us play them. And I laugh whenever I hear the shop theme from Ocarina of Time. I'm a huge Zelda fan because my mom would walk in and start dancing to it. So my dad would play Mortal Kombat with me, which I'm kind of looking back.
They let you win.
Yes, most of the time. But I'm kind of, the one I played was not nearly as graphic as the ones they have today. I mean, I was playing it on Super Nintendo, but I'm kind of looking back and thinking, I'm really amazed they let their 6-year-old daughter play this game.
I've gotten some of that feedback as well, playing these kinds of like violent games that, hey, the research says that it doesn't really affect you, or at least that's my read on it.
Yeah, I honestly just remember, hey, my dad's spending time with me, and another factor, oh my goodness, I can play as girls in this game. That was a big deal to me as
Murderous,
well.
violent girls, yes.
But yeah, my sisters still play games. I'm the big Zelda fan. They like Pokemon. We play Mario Kart on the Switch. So
Nintendo
I'm very
family, sounds like.
Yes. And I really, until I started dating when I was older, I didn't really play PlayStation and Xbox because with a family with 3 daughters, it's like, okay, we're all getting just one system. We're not buying, 5 different systems for you. You're going to have to pick Nintendo. And fortunately, we like Mario. We like Zelda.
You can do worse. Yeah.
So I enjoy it.
I never really played Nintendo in its heyday, like the N64 or the SNES. Like that was sort of like that period when I was in college. So that was like a big gap in my gaming career. And like I own a Switch, but I don't really play any games on it. But so I'm not really much of a Nintendo person. I don't play the Zeldas or the Marios or any of that sort of stuff.
I promise you have so many options outside as you realize.
I do okay. We're not coming up short with options.
No. I'm a big fan of Game Pass on Xbox.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah, I've got that too.
It kind of reminds me of Friday nights going to movie gallery or Blockbuster. And what game am I going to rent tonight?
Yeah. And as many as you want. You don't have to be, and nothing's ever checked out where it's just a box sitting on the shelf.
Exactly. So you mentioned podcasting and writing books. Which one came first, the published books or the podcasts?
So the books came first and the website before that. So I started doing the website in like 2009.
Okay.
Amazingly, just kind of on a lark. Like I'd always had like writing projects. So I would write about book reviews or write about stuff going on in my life, and kind of rode the original blogging wave in like the early 2000s, and never was like successful or popular. But I just decided like I should write about this psychology stuff applied to games, because I'd been reading a lot of stuff around applied psychology and the psychology of decision making. And that was like the era where, the idea of nudges and heuristics and biases like started to become really popular. And I was like, I should write about how this applies to games, and put up the website and wrote like 5 articles to launch with just for fun, and just decided, let's see where this goes. And amazingly, like psychologyofgames.com was available, like the domain. So I, grabbed that and threw up a WordPress site, and it found an audience fairly quickly, actually. And like I said before, a lot of it was game industry people, game designers, as well as other people that just kind of like to think seriously about games. And that was like the time period when the whole games academic, or like the academic study of games, not necessarily psychology, but just, ludology and thinking about games in an academic lens started to take off as well. So kind of riding that wave up, and did that for a few years, and then decided like, wow, I should write a book just about all of this. Cause a lot of other people had been taking the formula of like, okay, I wrote this blog and I have this archive of stuff from the blog, and I can turn that into a book. And I've got like an audience, and I can go to a publisher and I can say, X thousands of people come to my website every day. If you publish my book, I can get it in front of all of them, and some portion of them will buy something like that. And publisher, like, that's what they want to hear. Like, you have to have what's called like a platform for your book, meaning like people you can sell it to, who will listen to you when you tell them about it. And, you can get in front of them, which is why if you have like a big YouTube channel or a Twitch stream or something like that, you're a lot more likely to be able to get a book deal or get a publisher to publish your book than somebody who's starting from scratch. So I was kind of good timing. I was lucky that I had the audience that I had. It wasn't huge. It wasn't massive or anything, but it was enough that, publisher was like willing to say, okay, yeah, fine, we'll do it. So I did the book, and that was an interesting experiment because it was like book chapters are much more long form than a typical blog post. right?
Mm-hmm.
So blog posts might be like 1,000 words, maybe 700 or so. Mine tended to be a little bit longer on psychology of games, but book chapters might be 4,000 to 5,000 words or longer. So you get to sort of like explore much more in depth the topics, and then include like clusters of related topics under one heading. And it was a different experience than writing blog posts. And I ended up not like recycling nearly as many blog posts as I thought I would. I was like, this is going to be easy. I'm just going to take like these blog posts and cram them together, and that's a book. And it did not work out that way. Either just, and for the most part, like I decided not to work it out that way, just because I was having much more fun like diving deeper into these big questions. And each question or each chapter in the book is like a question, like, why do we do this when we play games? And why are games designed this way? And how do games get us to do this? And that was a fun approach to take. So I did that. And then when I submitted the final manuscript for that to the publisher so they could do their thing and edit it and get it ready, and it was still going to be like almost another year before it actually hit shelves, just because the print industry works that slowly. It's when you're dealing with physical things like that, it just takes a long time. And they have their schedule. It's like they're not going to release the book in February. They're going to wait for like June, because that's when most people buy books.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Summer tends to be like, maybe like the holidays too, but generally like, yeah, summer is like the big reading season when people have time and go on vacations and stuff. At least that's what they told me. Maybe there's like an actual industry, publishing industry insider out there listening right now and shaking their fist, but
I was talking to Jamie before we started recording, and I have his Getting Gamers book. I got it for Christmas, and I can say it has a lot of humor in it. It's like your psychology textbook meets a comedian, which I enjoy. It keeps the flow, it keeps it engaging, it keeps it conversational, and I appreciate that. It's entertaining.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you. I'm glad you find it that way, and I appreciate the compliment. And that was like a through line from the website and the blog that I wanted to maintain, because I tried to have that voice and that tone as there, because it's like, yeah, this is based in science, and I have references in there, and I went and read all these original sources and talked to all of these people and didn't just make stuff up. But it's also like, it's about video games. Come on, it's supposed to be entertaining. It's supposed to be fun. And so I wanted to make sure that it had that tone and that voice along with it. So kind of writing that line is fun and hard sometimes. And I probably fell flat a few times, but it was much better product, I think, than just another sort of dry textbook approach to all this stuff. And I've heard from like people teaching psychology courses and game design courses, they've used it as a textbook in their game, like for that reason.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I've heard from like 3 professors over the years that have done that, which I love and find completely flattering, and am tickled that they do that. And they usually cite like, yeah, this is something I think I can put in front of my students and they'll actually read it. They'll read it like all the way through and they can learn something from it.
Yeah. Education doesn't have to be boring or stuffy by any stretch of the imagination. So are there any particular psychologists or theorists that you've admired over the years, or you like to base practices off of?
I mean, not really. Like, it's hard to call out any particular psychologists, like especially these days, like everything is done in teams, right? Like science is done by groups of people these days for the most part. And there's been like breakout peoples like, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a lot about science of decision making, and Danny Kahneman had that book, Thinking Fast and Slow, came out in like 10 years ago or so, like 2011, I think, which has become sort of a very well-known book. And then, Dan Ariely, behavioral economist at Duke University, has written some stuff that I found really interesting that I reference throughout my books as well, the studies that he and his colleagues have done. So those are all people that if I see they have a new book out, then I'll go and I'll buy that, or go and kind of, they don't do that much original research anymore, it seems, but I'll keep up with the topics that they post about and write about.
Okay, because I always giggle when I think about like Frasier, how he's obsessed with Freud, and his brother Niles is obsessed with Jung.
Yeah, I mean that's for television. Like
Yes.
Freud and Jung were how do I always describe it? Like they were signposts on on psychology's road to like maturity and development. They were not final destinations. Like they were important early thinkers that like got a lot of stuff right and then just made up stuff out of whole cloth, or got stuff completely wrong or completely off the mark, or you're like, how did you come up with that? Or no, you are overreaching by miles when you're trying to make these claims. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say like, yeah, you should go read the original Freud or Jung or any of that sort of stuff. Like, if you want to, go ahead, whatever. I'm not stopping you. I'm not gatekeeping psychology, but I think you'll be limited in the practicality and the applications of that older stuff.
It's good to know that the field is evolving so much and people are discovering. I mean, that's what science is. What have we gotten wrong and how can we improve it?
Yeah. I mean, and like Freud was like one of the first people to identify the concept of the unconscious, right? And the fact that there are things going on underneath our consciousness that affect our behaviors and affect our decisions. And that's true. It's just that he was wrong in most of the particulars. I think most of the specifics are around that.
Seemed a little confidently wrong as well.
Right.
So tell us about your podcast. So we've talked about your website, we've talked about your books, and you're still creating a podcast amidst these other ventures. And that's amazing. Again, I don't know how you sleep.
Yeah. So the podcast I started, like I said, after I submitted the manuscript for the first book and I had time, and I was like, I'm going to do a podcast because you know what's really hot right now is spoken word. All the kids love it.
You can recite poetry for us tonight?
Yeah, no. I mean, as opposed to doing like a YouTube channel or something else that I could have chosen to do. But I was like, yeah, podcast, that's relatively low effort relative to like doing video at any way. And I thought I would be able to learn how to do it more easily, and then we could see where it goes. And here we are. I'm still doing it. So, you know, I just went out there. I bought like a cheap Blue Yeti microphone that was like $30 or something like that, and some headphones, and just totally did it on the cheap. And it worked well enough. Used like free software like Audacity to edit it and produce it, and just taught myself how to do it, and had a lot of fun doing that and learning about audio engineering, or at least the bare minimum of it that I needed to produce a decent sounding podcast. And then like for the longest time, I was recording it like in my closet. I would because I would set like a little table that might go in your kitchen. You might put like your microwave on it. Mm-hmm. And I would like roll that into the closet. And then I'd take my laptop and I would hook up the microphone, and I'd do it in there because like all of the clothes that were hanging on the racks in the closet would deaden sound, and it was really quiet, and you didn't have like any background noise or interference, and it sounded good or good enough. So I did that like for years and years and years. And then I upgraded to, you know, a better computer and a better microphone, and did some baffling, you know, in the room that I use for it. And got a little bit better at the audio engineering and like post-processing to make it sound a little bit better. But, yeah.
What do you love the most about podcasting?
So the format of the podcast is that I let somebody else do all the work. So I have like guest experts come on the podcast. So I'll reach out to people who are working in the games industry and they have a background in psychology, or researchers who are doing research or other types of writing or content about psychology and video games, and invite them on the show to be like a guest expert. So I have like one or two or occasionally three guest experts on a panel, and I'll just interview them, kind of like what you're doing with me, but generally I'll talk about like their research or their work or that kind of stuff. And to answer your question about like, what do I like best about it, is like meeting all of those people and growing my network to include them. Mm-hmm. Because I've met like people that do a lot of interesting stuff. And I know you're going to ask like, well, who's your favorite? And I don't know if I could say off the top of my head.
That's not fair, right? That's not fair.
It's not really fair. But you know, you can go to the Psychology Games website and see like I think I'm up to like 80, and the numbers is low because I do one episode a month. So I wanted to keep it both manageable so that I didn't like overcommit and underdeliver, and I wanted to like not burn through the potential guests too quickly, because there's only so many people that are doing stuff around psychology and games out there, and so I didn't want to like go through all that too quickly. So yeah, like getting to know them and networking with them, and then like running into them at a convention or something along those lines, or hey, like I'm in town, you want to go grab some coffee or lunch or any of that sort of stuff, and just like getting to know like what they're doing, and there's a lot of really interesting people out there, and I'm glad to have talked with some of them.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a gift right there. I mean, to have the ability and the opportunity to connect with these people. Did you ever imagine you'd be able to do that?
Nah, I don't know. I never really thought about it until I just decided to do it. People are surprisingly interested in talking to you about what they do. It's been like my general thing that I've discovered, and a lot of my work as an industrial organizational psychologist involves talking to people about their jobs. So in some ways that was a fit. So for a long time, I would be going and doing like job analyses, which involves like sitting down with somebody and saying like, what do you do? How do you do it? What technology do you use? What outputs do you produce? Who do you work with to do it? Who depends on you? Who do you depend on? Show me what you do. And having those conversations just about like, tell me about your work. And in a lot of ways, that's what my podcast is, that I'll get somebody on there and I'll say, tell me about your work. Like, what do you do? And a lot of times it'll center around a particular like paper or journal article that they publish, but other times it may just be about their job that they do. And people are surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, willing to talk about like what they do and talk about their work. And a lot of times they appreciate somebody like just taking an interest in that sort of stuff and talking shop with them.
I've heard that the biggest compliment you can give someone is saying, if they tell you what they do for a living, whether it be something more hands-on or maybe something more cerebral, if you say that sounds really hard, a lot of people take that as a compliment.
Yeah, that takes like a lot of expertise, or not many people could do that kind of thing.
Yeah, like you're special and you're unique, and this is a valid service. I mean, I'm of the opinion, oh my gosh, every job is so crucial, and I would absolutely, you'd notice if your sanitation worker stopped working. That would probably be the first job you notice if it disappeared.
Yeah. Not the CEO of the sanitation company, though. I would never notice if they didn't show up for work. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your website right now, and I mean, just the gamut of topics of fan convention, esports performance consulting, Twitch donation, psychology of trolling, just what a wonderful range of the psychology of the Legend of Zelda. I have that book actually.
You do? Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I just kind of like keep an eye out for books that come out. And like I said, by this point, I've developed like a network of people who do stuff in this area. And I can sort of hear a lot of times I'll follow them on social media and I'll see them tweeting about it or sharing something along those lines. And then, once every month or two, I just go on Google Scholar and do searches for psychology video game, or I'll go through some of the major journals and just see what their recent publications have been. And that's how I find new people to talk to a lot as well.
Now, this might be a reach, but I see something, the toxic behavior in games, and you discuss it in Getting Gamers and how people, they're behind the screen, they're sometimes not very nice. Has anyone ever reached out to you and said, I listened to this episode of your podcast, or I read about this in your book, and I recognized my behavior was not very kind and inspired me to change?
I haven't ever had anybody reach out to me in a confessing kind of way like that. Like, forgive me, Jamie, I have sinned.
They're back in the clothes closet and you can't see them.
Right. You're kind of a jerk, but I really don't know if I can help you. But I have had conversations just, with people that I've talked to, and they realize like, I troll for fun, or, I'm toxic for fun, for me, for them
Aw.
sometimes, and they kind of understand, why they do it and get a better sense of like the effects that it have on other people and on like the community as well, like, and the products and how much money and effort gaming companies have to spend and invest to deal with them, when they are toxic in a game like that. So yeah, I never had anybody reach out to me, but I have had conversations, especially like people who think that they've outgrown it. Like, yeah, I did that when I was younger. I did that when I was in a bad place or something along those lines.
Hurt people usually.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that we're on a positive trend now as that behavior is being recognized? And no. Oh, I was hoping for a
no, sorry.
People are people.
Yeah. No, I mean, I still see it a lot in the games that I play. Like I play a lot of like Overwatch, now Overwatch 2, which has got a bad rap, and Blizzard has had their own problems. I know I keep like bringing up their games, and they've had some legitimate like culture problems and the way that they treat their employees, but play a lot of Overwatch 2, and I won't touch like the competitive modes because they're just too toxic. Like people on there are just terrible, and screaming and yelling and all the things that you associate with toxic behavior in games. So I just like, and that's kind of a loss for me, and maybe in some ways for the other players and the potential players that I could be playing with and against, that I'm just like, nope, I'm sticking to quick play. I'm not gonna deal with that. And I'm turning off, or I'm leaving the voice chat as well. I don't use my mic in those games.
So I guess on the flip side, the positive side, if a parent went to you and said, I don't really know that much about video games. Yeah, I know who Mario is. My child is interested in playing games. Can you tell me some positive outcomes from playing video games?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for sure. There's a fair amount of research that talks about, I think I wrote an article about this on the website, about how games are good for de-stressing and like recuperating. So, you're at school and it's tough, or you're at work and it's tough, or you're dealing with your family, and games, like just like any other hobby that people do for fun, can help you recuperate those mental resources that you need to deal with stressors throughout the rest of the day and the week. So that's a great thing. Games can be a great form of socialization. I like most Tuesday nights. I know we're recording this on a Tuesday, but on most Tuesdays I have a group of friends that I play games with, video games.
Well,
so
thank you for making time for me.
Yeah, no. Well, one of them's actually like in the hospital. His wife's having a baby.
Oh,
so it's a good hospital visit.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And the other one's like in Miami, Florida, who, he used to live here in town with me, and we became friends then. And then his job took him to Miami. So we're able to like maintain that friendship and connect at least once a week, where we'll sit down and play games for, a few hours on a Tuesday night.
Nice.
So games can be great for maintaining and creating new social relationships, friendships, deepening them. They're the modern water cooler, the thing that, people can get together and talk about and experience together, especially through services like Discord or in-game, matchmaking and social tools. And then the thing I always like to point out is that games and game fandom are springboards for other hobbies as well. So how many people could you name that got into art or game programming or sound design or writing, fiction writing or nonfiction writing or games criticism, or all of these other kinds of things that you like to do when you're a fan of something? Like, I'm going to, write a story about Link, or I'm going to go create some fan art for Persona, this Persona game that I'm playing, or I'm going to learn how to make a podcast, or I'm going to learn how to stream on Twitch or YouTube, and I'm going to learn about video production through that. So games, I think, I suspect more than a lot of other hobbies, are very good at that, very good at getting people interested in not only like technical aspects like the audio production or streaming or programming or mod making or game design, but also those creative outlets as well, like fan art and fan fiction and streaming, like playing games and like entertaining people on a stream, those kinds of things, like being a personality, I guess is one way to put it, online. And so I've done that. Look, I've created websites and books and podcasts because I liked games and because I wanted to talk about them in a specific context. So I'm a good example of that as well.
I vividly remember when I was out in third grade and I was playing one of the Donkey Kong Country games, I thought I should write a story about Dixie Kong and Diddy Kong.
Yeah.
So,
Where's that story now? Is that...
It's on some index cards. I don't know if they're still at my parents' house or long gone, but
it's a more concrete answer than I expected, to be honest.
Oh, I vividly remember sitting at the dining room table writing about Dixie Kong.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard of other people doing this, but as a child, as I'd play games, in addition to pursuing the intended journey, I would actually like out loud narrate my own story.
Oh, really?
While playing.
Sure. I mean, people do what they call them, like AGRs, after game reports, where they'll do screenshots from their game. Like they'll take screenshots as they play the game, and then they'll write stories like after game reports.
Oh,
wow!
Sort of
like what they are, and they can range from like a description of the real events that happened when they were playing, or they can take those screenshots and then form them into something new, like a new story or narrative that they come up with along the way, or they'll come up with like headcanon for the characters and tell the story from another, an NPC's point of view or something crazy like that.
That's really creative. I think I'm going to have to jump into that because that sounds fun.
Yeah, it could be. It obviously is for some people.
Yeah. So you are a very busy person, and I know that you're working on your Psychology of D&D book. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah. So I'm a little over halfway done with that one, with that manuscript. So it's essentially getting gamers applied to tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, which is another hobby of mine, things that I played. I'm in a couple of games a week with a couple of different groups of friends. And so it's structured a lot like Getting Gamers, where each chapter is like a question. So it's like, why do we enjoy role playing, or like what can get us to role play our characters? Like, why do we get angry at dice? And which is about like perceptions, the psychology of perceptions around luck and randomness and that kind of stuff. And why do people get together and solve problems, or how to get people get together and solve problems as a group? What causes a group of people to gel and sort of fit together well? What's the psychology around like making choices in games of what kind of character do I build, or what do I do when it's my turn? So all of these kinds of questions, I thought could be answered by psychology, just like they were for video games. So I set out to do that and found a publisher, Leyline Press, who also published the Psychology of Zelda book that you mentioned earlier, and a few other psychology of video games kinds of things, and tabletop role-playing games. And they have like certification courses for geek therapists who are like therapists, psychologist therapists who want to incorporate like geek culture into their practice and sort of to connect with people and to use in their therapy. And so that will probably come out sometime in 2024. So don't go looking for it at your local bookstore just yet at the time of recording, but maybe, if you come to this podcast late, it might be available or available for pre-order.
Excellent. Do you have any other projects planned after that?
No. So that's going to be enough. I will probably take a step back and maybe refresh Psychology of Games to think about like, should I pivot to video? Like, should I learn how to do video production now and take that as like the next step and turn some of these things that I've done into YouTube videos. I'll only be about 10 years late if I decide to do that. Like what's hot at the moment. Or I might just keep doing the text and the audio podcasts and see how things go that way. But I don't have any other ideas for books yet. There may be another one. Maybe I'll try my hand at fiction. Who knows? world's my oyster, I suppose.
It is. It is. And I'm excited to see what you come up with. I've been enjoying your journey. I'm so happy I found your podcast, and I've actually only been doing this for about 2 years,
Oh,
interviewing
wow.
people. So I really enjoy it. I used to freelance for a local magazine and talk about things that were happening and local cool people. So
Mm-hmm.
that ended because it was sustained strictly through ads, and print
Oh, yes.
publications it's hard to.
Time has not been kind to the advertising model.
No.
Yeah.
No. So this is how I can do it. And I really like it because I can make it conversational and get to meet people. So I really appreciate your time, Jamie. And how can people support you?
So the probably the best and first thing to do is go to psychologyofgames.com. And that's the main website. And I've got like literally hundreds of articles that I've written since 2009 on there. They're all free for you to go check out. And then if you just wanted to do that to support me, to like go visit the website and read some of the articles and maybe tweet or otherwise share some of the ones you like best, then that would be great. And then you can also buy the book. There's information there. You can just go to Amazon or wherever else you buy books and search for Getting Gamers or The Engagement Game, which is the second book I wrote about sort of marrying industrial organizational psychology with the psychology of games, which is like, what does the psychology of good game design tell you about how to be a better manager, like in the workplace? Mm-hmm. So you can find out about that, subscribe to the podcast. And then you can always, if you really want to help me out, you can either buy the books or check out my Patreon at patreon.com/POG, which is where a lot of people choose to support me. But honestly, like, just go check out the website, see what you see.
That's awesome. And did you give your Twitter handle?
It's at Jamie Madigan, JamieMadigan.
Perfect. And you're very personable on there. I think you recently tweeted some PAX socks.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to PAX Unplugged for the first time earlier in December and had a good time.
Wow. Where was that? Which city was that in?
Philadelphia.
Okay.
So that's the one that's about tabletop games. So board games, card games, tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and others. So that was my first time going to that one. It was a good time. Yeah. Enjoyed it. Awesome. I had been to the PAX for video games a couple of times as well. And that's a similar but different experience. So had a good time at both.
Oh, are you planning on going to any conventions this year or expos?
Maybe. I'll have to see. I'd like to go to one of the big game D&D tabletop role-playing games, like either Gen Con, maybe, which is like one of the longest running, biggest ones. So maybe I'll look into going at that. And then next year, hopefully to promote the book, I can kind of have a better excuse to hit up some more of those and find time away to do that.
And sleep and eat at some point, hang out with your family, those things.
Yeah, those are important too.
Well, is there any other closing notes you'd like to share with listeners about psychology, video games, yourself?
No, I mean, I hope you all find it interesting. My mission is to sort of popularize the use of psychology to understanding why games are made the way they are, why they're marketed and sold the way they are, and why we behave as we do when we play them. And that's my mission. And if that piques your interest, then go check it out.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jamie, for your time. And I'm happy for your friend's new baby. That's so exciting.
Yeah. Maybe we can get back to gaming next week. We'll see.
Bring the baby.
That's right.
Let the baby win. Well, thank you all so much for listening. You can find other 1v1 interviews at bossrush.net, and you can follow me, Celeste, on Twitter at FairyCrypt. But until next time, we'll talk to y'all later. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
1v1, the creator interview series, is a product of Boss Rush Media, LLC, and part of the Boss Rush Podcast Supplemental Podcast. This show is hosted by Celeste Roberts. You can also hear interviews from other Boss Rush Media members on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at FairyCrypt. To get updates on the latest episodes, follow the Boss Rush Podcast, Boss Rush Media, and Boss Rush Network on all major social media platforms, or subscribe to the Boss Rush podcast feed in your favorite podcast application. Join the Boss Rush Network Discord and Facebook groups to interact with other friends and fans. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.